I'm delighted to welcome today Mike Lawrence, who is a mental health wellbeing consultant. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, Elaine. Thank you for having us on your show.
Fabulous. So we met a few years ago in person.
We have indeed.
And here we are now online, me in Portugal, you in Sheffield area, is it?
Yeah, well, my clinic's in Sheffield, but I live in Chesterfield.
Right, where I was born. Wonderful, with the crooked spire. Marvellous.
I can see it from my room.
Really? Oh, awesome. Awesome. Fond memories. Very fond memories.
Yeah.
I've never actually been up the spire. You can go up there, can't you? On certain...
I don't know. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I believe you can go up there in certain times, special high days and holidays or something. Anyway, so mental health. Tell us about mental health, how you got into it, what you actually do to help people in the mental health sphere, which seems to be increasing like topsy. Every street corner there seems to be something about mental health.
There is indeed. And I probably got into it through, I suppose it was just evolution, because I think that starting off, say, many years ago as a life coach and training lots of different complementary therapies, working with members of the public and business and people in business, there seemed to be a common thread which was behind a lot of the challenges in which people faced. And this was all down to sort of like someone's either depressed, was suffering from anxiety, or some other aspect of mental health. And it was finding that many of them are on sort of tablets, and so a lot of the clients were looking at other ways. I was going to say alternative, but they were looking at different ways, dare I say, and more natural ways of dealing with some of their problems. And also clients of mine coming in to talk about various things, and it could be breakup of a relationship, suicidal thoughts, and various other things had gone to the doctors. And unfortunately, especially not even before the last 2 years of going to see maybe the doctors and feel as though that there weren't a priority, think that were being not listened to. And these aren't my words, these are their words. And this is what they were saying to me. And so as I got more and more into it, thought that there was a need for me to focus more and more in those areas. And so therefore I did my mental health first aid sort of training, and then I became a mental health first aid instructor, which meant that I was able then to help even more people across a diverse range of cultures and environments.
It's interesting how the mental health first aid trainer thing seems to be now as popular as coaches were back in the 80s and 90s. And I think it's a sign of the times, and obviously it's needed. I actually did a mental health first aider training course recently, and I did that because I know that I'm not the go-to person for mental health. My attitude is that, all right, shit happens, get over it, deal with it, off you go. Here's a way to do it, and off you go, which of course isn't the way for many people. So I did the course so that I could learn more phrases, and I'd have more resources and tools that I could help people, because I do help people with my health and wellbeing stuff, which is a completely different area to how you help, but of course they all overlap. And what I learned from the course is that everybody seems to be really fragile. Everybody seems to be very, well, not everybody, obviously a sweeping generalization here, but people seem to be so much more fragile. I grew up in an era, I'm 65 now, and I grew up in an era where everybody, you put up, you shut up, you got on with it, stuff happens, deal with it, and that's it. So that's been my life, and that's kind of how I've conducted myself. But I am a particularly strong and resilient personality style. And I realized when I did the course that I'm actually quite unusual, and not many people have got the same outlook that I've got. People say glass half full or glass half empty. Well, my glass is overflowing. It always has been. So I've struggled to kind of get to grips. And because life in the last couple of years has been so different, so delicate, what I'm saying is I highly recommend people to do the course. And I know from your background and experience that you would be a very good instructor. So I take my hat off to you. It's very good.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's a change, sorry, because I think when when I'm in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to the Health and Wellbeing at Work show at Birmingham, and the last time I went there was 2 years ago. And when you're walking around the show, you see lots of independent private organisations putting on these training courses. And I think if I'm honest, when I first came across it, I'm thinking, well, how is that going to help? Because it's a 2-day, sort of training course. And when you look at the reports from the Health and Safety at Work, I think it was a 34-page report that they did, that they penned a couple of years ago into the, how beneficial it was and whether this has made a change. And I think from memory, in summary, it said that the people had been on the courses, from their findings was that there hadn't been a huge amount of change, but when you go on the course, what they highlight and identify is that you're only there to signpost people.
Yes,
you're not
exactly.
there it's totally different to the physical mental health, the physical first aid training course, where you actually that first point of call and you're going through your ABC and you're looking to administer, whereas with the mental health first aid training, you're there to signpost people. The good thing for myself, though, is that because I do a lot of the work myself, I'm able to signpost people to myself or other experts in the field, because one of the challenges, and you might be able to to add to this, is that one of the challenges is that when you finish the course or you're involved in helping somebody suffering from mental health and well-being, it's the case of what happens now. Where do you signpost those people? Because the first port of call is the GP, and quite rightly so. But I was saying earlier, a lot of my clients and people who I know, when they go to the GP, they're overwhelmed, and it might not necessarily be their priority, which is unfortunate. As we know, over the last few years, their priorities have had to change for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I was astounded when I did the course, because I was expecting more practical tools and resources. But as you say, it kind of puts it into perspective. We are not experts. Well, I'm certainly, you are, but I'm certainly not an expert in mental health. But it's the signposting, and I was actually doing that anyway. I've got quite a big contact database, so I was already doing this. So I didn't actually learn anything that I wasn't already doing, and I have been supporting people over the last year or so with suicidal thoughts and tendencies, and I did so in a practical way, in my kind of way. But also, some of these mental health issues can be down to mineral imbalances, which is the area that I work in. And I found, for example, magnesium. I'm wary, people have told, oh, take magnesium, take zinc, vitamin C. Well, vitamin C is fine, you can't overdose on that, you pee it out if your body's got too much. But various other minerals, the general advice is take this, take that. But if you've got too much of this or that in your body, that can cause even more mental health problems. So, for example, magnesium, for the benefit of the listeners, I'm sure you know this, but if you have too much magnesium in the wrong ratios with the others, it's the ratios that's important, not necessarily the amount. If you have too much magnesium, you are more likely to suffer from fatigue, from depression, and potentially suicidal tendencies, depending upon your physical chemical makeup of the body and so on. So it's been a wonderful learning period for me, all of this, but it all ties up, and the fact that we can all refer people to each other when we have these expertise is wonderful. So you're focusing more now on the mental health side of things, which is absolutely fabulous and definitely very timely. But you didn't always, you didn't go straight there. You started, I think, in a holiday sort of. I can't remember the colour of your coat, but didn't you wear a special colour coat?
It was red.
Right.
It was a red.
All right, tell us about that.
So it was in lipstick, wasn't it? Everybody asks about this, and I remember So I think you asked me about this when I was on your program. Was it Elastic FM when you were
Yes,
on?
that's right. You came in the studio when I was doing the radio show. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was on the, what was his name? I was being interviewed on Radio Sheffield on a daytime show. And they always ask you, ahead of all interviews, as everyone does, is anything interesting that we can share with the listeners? And as soon as you put on there, yes, I was a red coat, they all go crazy.
Yeah.
All these visions and notions of things you might want to get up to. But Ronnie Robinson, that's the name of it.
Yeah, I was on his show as well. Yeah, he does all those fast paced. You come out and you feel like you've been through one of those whirly doors, don't you, when you've been on with him?
Yeah. And he asked me a question, and I'd never thought of it before. And he was the only person that asked me that question. And he said, obviously, with all the fun and laughter and memories that you had from there, he said, was there any transferable skills that you got from there in regards to what you do now? And it was like, wow. And there were. And that was to be able to relate to a lot of people, because okay, I've been to university and I've got lots of the management training and and the work that I do and the courses that I've been on over a period of time. But one of the things that I think has been lost in today's society is that ability to be able to communicate and talk to people. And also, and I'm sure that you do this exceptionally well, is listen. And to feel, and when you sit in front of somebody, whether it be on Zoom, Teams or face to face, to actually listen and to understand and see what problems and challenges they've got, rather than waiting to just blurt out what's going on in your mind. Because as soon as we tell a story, the other person starts to run that story as well. And so you've got to kind of push that whatever into your mind into the back to actually really listen and to be empathetic there as well. And so there were huge transferable skills that I was able to take from that into, what I do now.
Wonderful. As you said, the ability to communicate. I mean, there's so many different ways that we do communicate. And I'm grateful for the Zoom, obviously being in Portugal, keeping in contact with all my contacts all over the world, but primarily in the UK has been really important for me. But when you're on a video call, you've got the body language side of things. Although you can't see the whole body, at least you can see some of it, and the facial expressions. And sometimes with communication, it's not what people are saying, it's what they're not saying and how they're reacting when they're saying, the faces they're pulling, where their eyes are going, and whether they're smiling or comfortable or uncomfortable, whatever. So there's lots of different ways, isn't there, that we can pick up on the messages that people are trying to tell us, even if they can't physically come up with the right words, Definitely.
It is, yeah. I remember when we first moved into the world of Zoom, and I've been working with a lot of people face to face, and also in organizations as well. And it probably took me a couple of weeks to make that transition. And at first, I'll be sat in front of somebody on the screen and talking and doing what I do. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not getting through. It's not working. And I couldn't figure it out. And then probably about 2 weeks later, it started to click. And when I look back at it, it's more or less what you said, is that normally you're seeing the face, the eyes, the cheeks, the whole body, the hands, the legs and everything. And you're picking up these subliminal cues all the way through and you're not aware of it.
Yeah. And oh, sorry, the cat's just getting hold of my headphones here. So it's when you can't see the whole body, it does make things more difficult, because, for example, some people will be sitting there wringing their hands or sitting on their hands, or they'll be, twiddling with something. They'll be, tapping their knees or, whatever, and we can't see that on the Zoom. So although it's wonderful, it doesn't take the place of one-to-one. So tell us about your clinic. Where is it? What do you do there? How does that work?
Well, the clinic's in Broomhill in Sheffield, and I've been there about 4 years. And typically, my clients have tended to be, and it's quite interesting because prior to COVID, my clients were typically women in their 40s, suffering with some form of mental health for at least a year, and I would help them using a 3-step system that I've created and developed over a period of time to improve their confidence. So once they've gone through that process over a 3, 6 or 12-month process, you tend to find that they are able to, have that better work-life balance, better relationships with with their friends and family, and also have more confidence overall. But through COVID, that balance has slightly changed, and I've actually seen more men. Some more men are actually coming forward, which is good, because there was always this, and still is, that stigma around men, because talks about in the early stages of mental health, that stiff upper lip, just to man up, and various phrases and terms which are being phased out at the moment in time. And it's good that men are starting to have that vulnerability and to go out and seek help, because I think prior to that they'd be playing football and going out to the pubs, but we've gone through huge changes, especially with men over 40s, and those pubs are now fresco bars, and the football clubs have been closed down, and so they're having to, and sometimes they're feeling comfortable around other men, and sometimes with their partners, to talk about some of the challenges and problems that they really have. But they might be frightened, and usually there's usually a barrier before they come, and they're trying to test you. Whereas I think with women, when they come along, you're not playing any mind games. It's more of a case of, this is my problem, help me. Whereas with men, it's just a case of you're playing like Sudoku or something, a crossword, trying to. But once you get over that barrier, that hurdle, and they trust you, boy, you can't get them out the door.
Brilliant. That's good to know. Absolutely. I find that as well with what I do with the health program that I've created. Men are not so good at telling that they've got a problem until the problem is so bad that they've got nowhere else to go. Excuse me. And it's like, oh well, I've tried everything else, and I might as well try you, kind of thing. Stop it, the cat's chewing the headphones. Sorry, you're going to have to go off my lap. No, off you go, showing how this is a live recording. Sorry.
That's okay.
Right, you're going to have to go down. No, you can't be trusted. There we go. So what was I saying about men? So men typically will come to me because of their wife insisting, and then they'll maybe do the program together that I've created. But as you said before, it's about, because the doctors are now so busy being busy doing goodness knows what. I really don't know what doctors do these days, because they don't seem to be seeing patients like they originally were intended to do. So sorry, sometimes when drop of water, when people come to me, often they've been to the doctors, they've had so many tests, they've had blood tests, then nothing's come back conclusive, and the doctor said, oh, it's in the mind, and they palm them off with medication, with sleeping tablets, tranquilizers, whatever. And then I can get to the root cause, because I use blood analysis and hair mineral analysis, chemical analysis, and so on. So I've got scientific tools that I use in conjunction with laboratories now, and alongside my coaching. So we get to the root cause of what is the problem. So we can see the chemical makeup, we can see the mineral analysis that I mentioned before, the ratios of what they're out of balance with, and some of these imbalances do cause mental health. We get to see what's actually happening in the blood. So when we can see all of those things, then we can then create a plan and reassure people that their mental health in some situations, obviously again generalizing hugely, isn't necessarily because, you know, they've had a bit of a brain blip or whatever. It's because there is a chemical imbalance in their body, which we can correct very simply. But the medical profession aren't trained, as you mentioned before, they're not trained in these complementary other ways of looking at things. So it's a great time, I think, at the moment, and we've got so many connections that we can refer people to. It's really fabulous.
It is. And I think what's also driving this is the millennials and the younger generation, because they are, I think we're from a generation where we'd go along to the doctors and quite rightly so, and still do that, because that's usually the first port of call. But the millennials and the younger generation, they're questioning and they're asking more and more questions. And so, whereas from our generation and our parents' generation, we'd be given a series of tablets, you know, take 2 of these certain times, you know, a number of times of day for a week or 2. Try that. If it doesn't work, come back and we'll try some more. Whereas I'm finding like the younger generation, they're actually, you know, using Dr. Google, going out there and Googling things, looking to see what's actually inside of these, the medication, and then querying and questioning and potentially moving away from that and looking at alternative, or I'd say more natural sort of remedies.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe in the integrative approach, because the doctors, the National Health Service, are wonderful in the crisis. It's the prevention piece that they're not too good at, because they actually want customers to give the drugs to. But in my experience, that's what I found. But when you can have an integrative approach, which is I've had 4 different versions of cancer, as you may remember, including stage 4, that I beat in 14 weeks. And that was way back in 2015. So each time I've had a challenge, I've used whatever tools have been at my disposal at the time, and my training and so on and so forth. So the integrative approach, to get the best of all worlds, I think is a sensible thing to do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what advice would you give to anybody who's feeling a bit fragile at the moment? Maybe they're aware that they're anxious, or maybe, I mean, some people don't even know that they're in a pickle. It's not until they get really, really on their knees that they then seek help. So are there any warning signs that people could look out for?
There's quite a few. I think that the first one is to talk about it. Don't suffer in silence, as I always say. Speak to friends, speak to a member of the family. And I think that also those first steps is, if you're already seeing a doctor, consult with the doctor. And I think that the easiest thing for most people do is to go on YouTube or go and Google it, and then they'll go off and then look for various, they might then start second guessing what these signs and symptoms are and going there in the dark, and then end up buying lots of products. End up buying lots of products which may or may not work. So the key thing is to seek out sort of experts or people who you know, and either just who are familiar with some of these challenges and problems. There are lots. There's an app which we talk about a lot on the mental health first aid when we're delivering these courses, and there's an app called the Hub of Hope. I don't know if you've come across that one.
No, I haven't. No, I wasn't told of that. The Hub of Hope.
Yeah, okay. The Hub of Hope, and it's an app that you can download. I'm not sure if it works in Portugal, but you can give it a try.
Yeah, I'm on a UK system as well as Portuguese, so yeah, I should be able to get that.
Okay. And you'll find that, especially around sort of mental health and well-being, well, it's not just mental health and well-being, it's a wide range of health sort of like ailments. And you can download that, and you can put in your postcode of where you are, and there's a list of support services which are sort of like available. You've also got the big charities, you know, like Mind and is it the mental health.org, and lots of other ones which are available, local authorities giving out lots of advice and information. But overall, people like myself, people like yourself are available. And the biggest, and I think that's the biggest part of the biggest challenge, is finding the people like myself, yourself, and all these lots of other people as well. Because when they do come across us and others as well, it's like, oh my word, I didn't know you people existed.
Yeah, that's where I would recommend people don't actually go on Google, but use other resources, DuckDuckGo and so on, because Google only promotes those with big budgets to advertise on. So there's lots of alternative, you know, other platforms such as BitChute and Rumble and Odyssey and all these, some wonderful educational videos out there, which is you know, the complementary and integrative approach.
So I think because I think many people felt as though that who provide that sort of support for people, that because it's not part of the primary care trust, it's, you know, and not being referred to as a referral point from doctors, and sometimes you won't find these people when using your if you've got medical health insurance. But when you read the various magazines and articles, there is a lot of pressure being put on these agencies and bodies to make that change, because it's what people want. People are asking for, you know, different ways of, you know, treating a challenge or treating a problem, and there's a lot of people out there who are able to, you know, to do so.
Wonderful. So how do people find you, Mike? What's your website?
Straightforward. My website's mikelawrence.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn, just typing in my name, I should come up on there. And also on Facebook, you'll find me, Mike Lawrence, Health and Wellbeing Management Consultant. You'll find me on there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Mike. It's been very interesting catching up with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.